The road stretched endlessly ahead, but it felt less like a path and more like a sentence. The closer we drew, the heavier the air became, as if the very land knew the weight of what lay beyond. A thin mist clung stubbornly to the fields, dulling the morning sun and muffling every sound. Even the birds, usually defiant in their songs, seemed absent here. Silence ruled this place. Silence, and the dread that crept into your bones the nearer you got. And then, through the fog, the structure began to appear, not suddenly, but in fragments, as if the earth itself was hesitant to reveal what it had allowed to grow on its back. First, the dark outer fences, steel teeth rising toward the sky. Then, the watchtower's cold, squared silhouettes like the eyes of predators. Finally, the walls, monstrous slabs of concrete, weather-stained, impenetrable. This was no ordinary prison. This was the terrorism confinement center known to locals as El Centro, a place where the government caged the men who once caged an entire nation in fear. Long before we reached the main gates, the first barrier appeared, a military checkpoint. Armored vehicles squatted across the road like beasts refusing passage. Soldiers in green camouflage and black vests stood at attention, rifles cradled in their arms. Their faces were obscured by black glasses, reflecting back only your own nervous expression. The order came like a gunshot. Stop the vehicle. Our driver braked hard, the tires crunching gravel, and instantly we were surrounded. Soldiers moved with precision, 2 at the doors, 1 at the hood, another circling to the rear. There was no wasted motion, no hesitation. These men lived in a state where 1 second's doubt could mean death. Step out, slowly. The command was sharp, mechanical, void of emotion. We obeyed. The air outside was hotter than inside the car, and yet a coldness ran down my spine. My feet touched the dirt, but it felt unstable, as though the earth itself was recoiling from the fortress ahead. Hands guided us into a line. Identification cards were demanded, inspected under glaring lights, scanned against lists we couldn't see. The soldier's expression never changed, hard, unreadable. To him, every face was a potential threat. The frisking began. Hands swept across arms, down legs, pressing against pockets, belts, shoes. Even my collar was tugged back, exposing the skin of my neck to the hot, merciless sun. I felt less like a visitor, more like a suspect. And that was the truth. At El Centro, everyone was guilty until proven otherwise. That was only the beginning. The prison was built with 7 layers of security, 7 tests, each harsher than the last. By the time you reached the core, you had shed every piece of identity, every claim to the outside world. Checkpoint 1, military verification. Checkpoint 2, biometric scanning. Checkpoint 3, canine units, noses tracing every inch of your body, every fold of your bags. Checkpoint 4, disrobing and surrendering personal items, phones, watches, wallets. Time and connection were luxuries forbidden beyond this point. Checkpoint 5, electronic scanners humming like insects, stripping away the illusion of privacy. Checkpoint 6, interrogation, where questions pierced deeper than bullets. Checkpoint 7, the final gate, where metal doors slammed with a thunder that rattled your bones, declaring that the outside world no longer belonged to you. Each step was a ritual of erasure. By the 7th, you were not yourself. You were merely a shadow entering a place where shadows ruled. When the last gate opened, it was not with a creak, but with a thunderclap of steel. The sound echoed off the concrete like a gunshot, bouncing back into your chest. The air inside was stale, heavy, charged with something you could not name. The guards who greeted us were different. Their movements were rigid, mechanical, like men who had long since surrendered their humanity to the monotony of control. They did not speak more than necessary. Words in this place were dangerous. They could be overheard, twisted, used. I tried to look beyond them, deeper into the heart of the prison. What I saw was not simply a corridor. It was a throat, swallowing us whole. The first thing that struck me inside was the smell. It clung to the walls, to the air, to the very skin of the place. Sweat, bleach, rust. A sour undertone of decay. It was the scent of too many men packed too closely together, of cloth unwashed, of iron left to corrode. It was the smell of humanity stripped bare, forced to ferment in the heat. We passed through the first cell block, and I realized quickly that these were not cells as one imagines in movies. They were not small, private boxes. They were caverns, 32 in total, each swallowing nearly 100 men. The bunks were stacked tight, iron frames scraped and bent from years of weight. Thin sheets sagged like tired skin. In some corners, men sat cross-legged, their eyes blank, their bodies swaying slightly as though rocked by an invisible tide. In others, men pressed their faces against the bars, watching us with a hunger that was not for food, but for recognition proof that the outside still existed. There was no privacy. No corner belonged to anyone. Every breath was shared, every movement observed. And yet worse than the lack of space was the light. The bulbs overhead glowed with merciless intensity. They never dimmed. Day and night were erased under that white glare. Prisoners slept with arms across their eyes, woke with headaches, stumbled through days that felt like months. There was no sunrise here, no dusk, no stars, no relief, only the eternal glare of artificial day searing into skin, bleaching hope into nothingness. Time itself had been murdered. And then came the rules, carved into the very structure of the place. Prisoners here did not speak freely. They did not write. They did not draw. They did not sing. Communication was forbidden except in whispers, and even then, danger lurked in the ears of those who listened. A wrong word could cost a privilege, a ration, a piece of life. Every movement was controlled. Every action monitored, every breath counted. And all the while, cameras watched. Dozens of black eyes embedded in the walls, unblinking, tireless. The men inside knew they were never alone. And that, perhaps, was the cruelest truth of all. Meals were delivered twice a day, plastic trays slid across the floor like offerings thrown to beasts. The food was as gray as the walls. Rice clumped into sticky mounds, beans thin as water, tortillas that cracked like old paper. Meat was rare, and when it appeared it was more bone than flesh. No seasoning, no variety, no pleasure. Just fuel, barely enough to keep bodies alive. The men devoured it without complaint. Hunger was the only law stronger than the prison itself. Though I was only a visitor, not a prisoner, I stayed long enough to witness something most would never see. The first night. Or rather, what should have been night. When the clock struck midnight outside, nothing changed inside. The lights still burned, the air still hung heavy, the walls still pressed close. Only the sounds shifted. Murmurs died away. Shuffling bodies sought uneasy rest. The silence thickened, but it was never complete. Somewhere, someone coughed. Somewhere else, a man muttered in his sleep. A chain clinked as a prisoner shifted, and above it all, the hum of electricity, constant, eternal, the sound of power, of control. I lay awake in the observer's chamber, listening, my body tense though I was safe, and I wondered, how many nights had these men endured? How many more would they? For here time did not move forward. It only circled endlessly in a loop of white light and silence. The clang of steel reverberates down the corridor. Chains. Always chains. Every transfer in this prison begins with the same ritual: hands pulled behind backs, wrists locked together in metal cuffs, ankles bound with shackles. A prisoner cannot take a single step without the sound of iron scraping against iron. To move one man is to move a storm of metal. The guards don't walk them, they drag them. 4, sometimes 6 soldiers flank a single prisoner, rifles raised, fingers resting near triggers. Their eyes don't blink, their jaws clench. Because here, trust does not exist. Even bound in chains, each prisoner is considered a living weapon. Some men resist. Some spit curses in the guards' faces. Others bow their heads, silent, as though already broken. But the rule is the same for all. Any spark of rebellion is crushed instantly. A knee in the back, a rifle butt against the ribs, boots pressing skulls to the concrete. There is no room for mercy. The corridors echo with a single message: submit, or be destroyed. If the walls could talk, their language would be ink. Everywhere you look, on arms, necks, faces, tattoos mark the men inside. They are not art. They are declarations. A number on the cheek, a code for rank, a tear below the eye, blood shed for the gang. Across the chest, across the back, sprawling letters like banners of war. MS-13, Barrio 18. The tattoos speak louder than voices. They mark who belongs where, who is killed, who has survived ambushes, who carries the most fear. Even without words, one glance at a prisoner's body can tell you his entire criminal history. But now, inside these walls, tattoos have lost their power. The gang soldier who once commanded a block of the city now sleeps on a cold floor like every other man. The ink that once made police tremble now brands them all the same way: enemies of the state. Some prisoners cover their tattoos, ashamed, wishing to erase their past. Others flaunt them, pressing their faces to the bars, glaring at guards as if to say, "You can cage me, but you will never erase me." There are places inside this prison even worse than the crowded dorms. Places whispered about among prisoners and feared like death itself: the isolation cells. No windows, no light. Only a single slot in the steel door where food is slid inside. Here men vanish. They do not speak. They do not shout. Days blur into nights until time itself dissolves. Some prisoners emerge after weeks, eyes wild, hair torn out in clumps, speaking to shadows that are not there. Others never emerge at all. Their bodies leave, not their souls. One guard speaks in a low voice, almost unwilling to admit it. Isolation isn't punishment, it's erasure. Prisoners do not dine, they survive. Their meals arrive in thin plastic bags, tossed carelessly through cell bars. Rice clumped into sticky masses, beans watered down until they are little more than black liquid. Occasionally, a shred of meat, but so little it dissolves between the teeth like smoke. The men fight over food not because it is good, but because hunger is stronger than pride. Plates do not exist. Bowls do not exist. They eat with their hands, crouched on the floor, scooping rice and beans as if clawing for life. The guards say, it is enough to keep them alive, nothing more. And yet, for some, even this meager meal is fuel. Hunger sharpens rage. Rage waits like a blade beneath the skin. It is easy to forget that this prison cages not only the criminals, but also the men who guard them. Each guard wakes knowing he is outnumbered 100 to 1. He straps on body armor not just for protection, but for courage. He grips his rifle as if it is the only thing keeping him tethered to the outside world. When asked what they fear most, guards do not say riots. They do not say escapes. They say silence. The quiet, one admits. When hundreds of men suddenly go quiet, you know something is wrong. Something is waiting. To walk the corridors of this prison is to walk the edge of a blade. Guards never turn their backs. They never meet a prisoner's eyes for more than a second. They know one mistake, one slip, and the cage could become their tomb. Not all voices here are angry. Some break under the weight of time, pouring out confessions like poison spilling from a wound. One man whispers through the bars, voice hoarse from disuse. I killed for them, for the gang. They said I was family. But where are they now? Where is my family? Another laughs, bitter and broken. You think these walls are punishment? No. The real punishment is remembering every face, every scream, every child who never grew up. That's what keeps me awake. And then there are those who confess nothing. They stare at you, eyes cold, lips curved into a smile that is not human. For them, prison is not regret. It is simply another battlefield. Step outside the gates and the world feels different. The air is lighter. The sun seems brighter. But the memory of the prison clings, heavy, impossible to shake. The terrorism confinement center is not simply a building. It is a mirror, a reflection of a nation's war against its own darkness. Inside, you see what men become when violence defines them. Inside, you see how far a government will go to crush terror. Inside, you see the price of survival chains, silence, erasure. And you are left with a question that echoes louder than any slam of steel. When you strip away everything, freedom, dignity, time itself, are you killing the monster or creating a new one?